Mark Young heads up the consumer and business lending portfolio for Vodacom Financial Services. Now, prior to joining Vodacom, he was the CEO of the Finclusion South Africa Group and a founding director of Fractal Labs and Click to Pay, with over 25 years, that's right, experience in the African financial services landscape. He was previously the CEO of the lending businesses at MyBucks, a Pan-African listed fintech. Prior to joining MyBucks, he was the founder and CEO of Ideation, a specialist lending and insurance consulting company with clients from South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and Malawi. Mark, you were also previously the Deputy CEO and CRO for Bayport South Africa, CRO of Old Mutual Finance. You've served on the chair of these organizations and credit committees, as well as serving as a non-executive director of Mazwi Financial Services, Old Mutual Investment Administrators, and you were a trustee and chair of the board of trustees of the Fairburn Capital and BOE Retirement Funds. Mark, that is quite a lot, but at the same time, ladies and gentlemen, if there's one person who understands not only the intricacies of finance, but SMMEs in particular in a South African context, Mark, welcome. You are in no better hands than those of Mark Young. It's so good to have you, Mark. And before we get started, I'm going to ask you just to keep your eyes on the screen. We're about to play a short video for you.
My name is Palesa Mazibugo. The name of my business is called Parsley on Time. What the funding helped me with in my business was cash flow. It's very hard to start something new, reinvest in your business, and still have to deal with payroll. Everything I did was online. I was done in about 15 minutes. Having the right partner, like VodaLend Business Term Advance, is very important to me because they go beyond your financial needs. They want to know what it is exactly that you would need access to funds for, not just for now, but even in the future.
Thanks so much, Kim. And I think to everyone that's on the call, thanks, Wayne, for giving up some of your time to kind of listen to us and engage this morning. Absolute privilege to be here. I think Kim may have oversold me a tad. But it's just that it's kind of like my experience is just a polite way of saying I think I've been around in lending in South Africa for a while. But I think, the SME challenge for all of us and in South Africa specifically is very real. I was reading a state of the SME report before I joined this call this morning, and I was saying there's close to 730,000 active SMEs in South Africa right now. That's a net growth of 60,000 or so since we emerged from COVID at the tail end of 2020 into 2021. So we've seen significant growth, and it accounts for about 30% of the formal employment in South Africa. So I think before we get into the Q&A and get into everything else, it's kind of just an opportunity to say thank you for everything that you guys do as SMEs to contribute to the growth and the employment creation opportunities in the country. I think as Vodacom Financial Services and as the VodaLend business lending team, we're fortunate to have been a part of that journey, even just for a fairly limited time. We launched the products just before COVID, actually, in the tail end of 2019. And since then, over the past kind of 4 to 5 years, we've been able to assist more than 3,500 SMEs with just over 1.1 billion rands worth of funding. We do that, for those of you who might have used the product before, familiar, we do it like simple, easy digital journey, fast turnaround times. We understand that sometimes that need is more pressing than a more traditional, finance banking operation might take, and we provide unsecured funding. So again, there's no need for collateral. There's no threat of repossession or your security kind of being perfected if something goes wrong, or if you hit difficulties. So it's a very different relationship throughout the journey with the business. And I think that partnership that we've built with the SMEs that use our product and our platform, is reflected in the fact that probably close to half of the financing we've provided in the last financial year was customers returning for their second or third round of funding from ourselves. So we've clearly built the product with the market, with what we believe is a market need and a market understanding in mind. But it would be great to engage today to hear like firsthand what those challenges are, what your experiences are, and whether you've got ideas and tips for what we can do to make the product, the journey, and any experience and engagement you have with us even better.
Well, Mark, we're excited because you're actually getting on the ground. And I think there's nothing more important than finding out and listening to what the people have to say. I'm already seeing a question coming through. Lindani, I see you. But before we get there, I'm just going to establish things as we start. Let's get into the conversation because it will spark other questions that you might have as well. So, Mark, you touched on it briefly just now. You said you provide unsecured lending for those of us who are new to this territory, because I mean, there's so many things when you are a startup or an SMME that the amount of information can be overwhelming. But what is unsecured lending or funding?
Thanks, Kim. So unsecured funding essentially means that there's no collateral or security required as part of the loan application journey. So if you think about if you were buying a car, that car is effective, that vehicle finance that you would buy in your individual or in your business's capacity is essentially secured finance. The asset is like held or owned by the bank, and in the event that you don't pay, the bank would come and potentially repossess that car. In the case of unsecured funding, there isn't any collateral. There's no, as I said earlier, there's no threat of repossession. So it's really, funding that you can use in any way to grow, assist, maintain your business.
Well, I think that's marvelous to hear, because given the history of our country, many of us that are entering the business landscape now, or entered the business landscape a couple of years ago, there isn't much collateral to deal with in the first place. This already puts you at an advantage. Now, is there any kind of qualifying criteria that one needs for unsecured funding in this instance?
So there is. So ultimately, it is a financing product. We do have to manage when we do that kind of a risk return and manage the portfolio as a whole. So there are some minimum criteria. We do need the business to have been in operation for at least a 12-month period. But we have very low minimum turnover requirements, as an example. So although you have to have been in operation for a period, the minimum turnover is 40,000 Rand a month to be able to qualify for finance. So it's relatively, that barrier to entry is relatively low. And you need to be, there needs to be a registered business with a bank account. So it needs to be a slightly formal process, with directors, with at least one director, essentially.
So a decent paper trail, but not the fact that you need to be turning over 10 million Rand a month before they're even considered.
Correct, yeah. So the growth opportunity, and I think the employment creation opportunity in South Africa is definitely in that smaller, SME business with some established track record, let's say, but it doesn't necessarily have to be scaling and massively and growing massively in order to be able to use the product.
Yeah, I think that's great, because that barrier to entry now means that, it's much more realistic to be able to attain that funding if you need it. Mark, I wanted to find out from you, when it comes to the funding, is there anything specific that it needs to be used for? Does Vodacom stipulate any criteria, or what can it be used for?
Yeah, cool. Another great question. So it can pretty much be used for anything. It's not prescriptive in terms of, you're taking the finance to do this, or you're saying you need it for payroll and then you need it to buy an asset, or you need to do something else. So it's not prescriptive at all. You would have seen from the Parsley and Time video that, Palesa used it, I think, to fund payroll, like the gap of payroll at month end while invoices are coming in. Some people use it to buy assets. Some use it to, rent premises and pay the deposit and the rest. So really, it is the use case is almost unlimited, if I could put it like that.
Okay, that's fantastic. So there's no kind of, you can only spend 10% on advertising, or is there? There isn't any of that kind of restriction.
No, so you can spend it on advertising, on marketing, whatever you need, whatever you believe you need it for to help your business grow.
And then I wanted to find out from you, say I apply now. How often can I apply to VodaLend? Is it once off? I've been a good payer, or are there multiple instances?
So typically at the moment, once you apply, you are eligible for refinancing, which can either be a re-advance or a new finance agreement. Generally, it's a re-advance and a refinance within after about 3 months. So if you were to borrow in an access finance and funding now in May, you would be eligible for refinance in August, September, assuming that your payment record is up to date and you've not slipped on a payment or not engaged with us about that.
Okay, perfect. I see that there's a question from Luyanda, which might be an important one to answer, Mark. They're wanting to know, do startups qualify? He or she asks because their business is a startup level, operating at minimum viable product stage. They don't have a monthly turnover as they don't have the capital to fully operate. What happens in this instance?
Yeah, so unfortunately at the moment with the partners that we have on board for the product, we aren't able to provide startup funding. We do look for that 12 months of operating runway, let's say, to have some kind of proven track record. So unfortunately at the moment, startups in that, if they're through 12 months of operation, then absolutely I think there's an opportunity to have a discussion. But if they're in that initial period, we're unfortunately not able to assist.
So then I'm in no position to give financial advice, but all I can say is keep going because you will get there. An anonymous attendee is stating that their business is active. However, they don't get their money on a monthly basis. They need a certain amount to buy into a business that is currently making an income, that particular business, of 174,000 Rand. Is it possible to assist this kind of a business loan? Because they're saying that they're not getting it, but the business that they want to buy into is.
So I'd encourage them to apply. Obviously, there's a full credit decisioning process that happens, when you apply. So I'd encourage them if they've been operating for long enough, and there's an element of consistent cash flow, even if it's not regular monthly cash flow, that they apply and see, whether or not they qualify.
Okay,
it's
great.
hard to make that. I mean, it's hard to comment on absolute approval without having all the detail and having someone go through that application
and the
journey.
full history. Yeah, you need to.
Yeah,
you need to do the whole process in order to see if it's a possibility. I'm going to get back to our questions over here, and I think this is a good one because most of us, we've got our bank accounts, the business has been going. But how is my application assessed? I know credit history can sometimes be an area of anxiety for most of us, but how is the application assessed?
Yeah, so there's, let's call it three or four primary kind of decision gates. There's one around like the basic, let's all call it credit policy rules that we've spoken about now. So how long has the business been in operation? Is it a registered entity? Does it have a bank account? All the good governance stuff, as we said earlier. Then there's a credit bureau process where we do an inquiry on both the directors and the business. And I know, in preparing for this, there were a lot of questions around that and the scores component. They are both very predictive of risk. I mean, we've been in this portfolio we're running this portfolio for 5 years. I've certainly been in consumer and business lending for longer than that. And they are both predictive of whether or not a customer has, probability and likelihood to repay. So we do both of those. Then there's an affordability based on the bank statement information that's provided. So you provide bank statements. We look at the business assessment process looks at cash flow. And then there's an industry component to it, which says, at the moment, there's certain industries that we don't lend into, as an example. And yeah, I mean, like adult entertainment, so gambling, etc. That we don't finance, as an example.
Well, that's an interesting one, but okay, glad you cleared that up.
Yeah, so perhaps the gambling one is the best better example. But so the sectors we don't lend into, and then from there, an offer is presented back to the customer, they accept, and then the funds are dispersed fairly soon after that.
So Mark, I know that while we're listening, one of the questions that might be rumbling around in somebody's mind is, why is this credit scoring so important? Because some of us might, you can see the business is doing well, but why is that credit scoring so important?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we've seen in in the history of the performance of the portfolio that there are certain criteria that you see on the bureau that
Yeah.
are predictive of whether or not a customer is likely to repay over time. I know there are lots of questions around, what happened during COVID. Business performance
Sure.
was not that great. We all, everybody, missed one or two payments during that period. And I think the one kind of like sense of comfort or comforting factor from that is generally the period that is looked at for both individuals and the businesses from a credit bureau perspective is probably the last 2 years. So we're out of that COVID cycle now in terms of the date, like the credit bureau, like the old school credit bureau data that's used for that process, and we're now into a more we're now into like a more kind of stable kind of component. So that COVID experience is, it's somewhat diluted, let's say, from overall decisioning. But in reality, that data is predictive of customers that may or may not repay.
And I suppose it's a really good thing, right? To understand your own patterns as well. It forces you, if you don't meet the criteria from a credit scoring perspective, it forces you as a business owner to sit down and go, okay, what am I doing wrong? And in the assessment of what am I doing wrong, Mark, do you have any tips on how do I improve my credit score?
So I think there's some very small, let's call it behavioral changes that can, that can impact the score almost without people knowing. One of them is the bureau is a fairly absolute blunt instrument almost in the sense that if you miss your payment by 1 day, be it as the business or as an individual. So if you're saying, I should pay this today, but I'll just pay it tomorrow morning. The way that data is submitted to the bureau is that actually reflects as a missed payment for the previous month.
Wow.
So it's
just
very,
12 hours later can make a difference.
So 12 hours later can make a difference. It doesn't always, right? But it can. And it's those kind of small, behavioral issues, I think that people don't realize can have an impact on performance. And then that one miss stays in your payment, like in that history for 24 months, as an example.
Yeah.
So it's it's definitely definitely kind of prudent, I guess, to make sure kind of where you can, you pay everything that you can on time, make sure it's actioned appropriately. And then people also talk a lot about, if I'm shopping around or applying for credit in a lot of places, that has like, in a very short space of time, that has a negative impact on the score. And that's not entirely true. I think in the consumer space, if you're applying at a lot of like, short-term consumer lenders, that can have a negative impact on your score, as an example, and some lenders will use it. But when you're applying for SME finance, it's almost accepted that you are going to shop around. You're not going to be beholden to one. You're going to look around. So if you've done, you've applied with us, you've done an inquiry with VodaLend, you've done one with LulaLend, with Retail Capital, Genfin, whoever else might be active in the market, those 4 in a week or so are not going to negatively impact your, in absolute terms, not going to negatively impact the decision or the score. I mean, it's practically and pragmatically, we understand that people are going to look for the best opportunity and the best deal.
Okay, wonderful. That's really good to know. And you mentioned LulaLend. I see a question here saying, what's the relationship with LulaLend? Is there any kind of relationship? Yeah,
so we, as Vodacom Financial Services, we use LulaLend as our balance sheet and product partner for this. So, together, LulaLend effectively run the back end of the product. It's branded VodaLend Financial Services, but they perform the credit decisioning, they do the admin and the collections process. And that's been a really great 5-year relationship with them, where we've been able to build, a product and a business together alongside their existing core business.
Well, that's excellent. It shows the collaboration that we speak about, especially when it comes to SMMEs in particular. Now, say you grant me the loan or the funding. What happens if I can't afford to make my repayments. So I may have started out well, something goes wrong, or business is just a little bit slow, particularly if it might be a seasonal business. What happens if I can't afford to make those repayments?
Yeah. So again, we're very, well, we're certainly very flexible in terms of repayment terms and the rest. We understand that, let's say, unexpected life events happen, whether it be in individual space or in the business space. And our focus is like rehabilitation rather than enforcement, I think is the best way to describe it. But it does require, let's say, more proactive engagement. So, in the event that businesses are in trouble or they think they're going to have a short-term challenge or seasonal challenge in terms of meeting the repayment commitments, encourage them, engage with us. Let's have those discussions and let's see how we can work with you to accommodate the business through that period. And then when it's managed proactively, it's a far simpler process. Generally, we're able, I'd like to believe we're able to help.
Yeah.
As opposed to businesses going silent and not engaging, which makes the collections component like a bit more difficult and a bit more complex to execute.
And it's great hearing that from Vodacom itself, as you say that, Mark, that the focus is rather on rehabilitation. I think that's a really lovely line, because businesses do go through different cycles. And I think, like you said, if you are proactive, it also shows the character of the business owner, right? Which can also stand you in really good stead. Now, when it comes to the repayments as well, are there other options? You mentioned that it's the rehabilitation. Are there other options, like, for example, that business might be coming through in 3 months' time. I might not be able to make the payments for the next 3 months. Do you extend it for a further 3 months, or what are the options there?
Yeah, so definitely look, that's assessed on a case-by-case basis, and depending on what the need is, and what the challenge might be that the business is facing at that time. So in an example like that, where we can see, let's say you can see an order book. As an example, it's coming, but there's a 3-month gap, then yes, we would restructure something like that over a 3-month, like almost like a 3-month moratorium, let's say, and then start collecting once the business is back in kind of a stable position. But each one of those situations is nuanced and a little bit different.
And you'll take it on a case-by-case basis.
On a case-by-case, yeah.
In comparison with other lenders, how do VodaLend's unsecured funding options compare to those lenders in terms of interest rates, repayment terms, etc.?
Yeah, so we believe that on price and on risk, we're competitive in the market. Obviously, we use VodaLend to have a lot of experience on that in the market as well. It's not an interest rate based product, so if anyone's accessed finance from VodaLend or Retail Capital, or you've used us in the past, you would see that it's essentially let's call it a purchase of the future cash flows in the business, and there's a fee charged on a monthly basis, as part of the kind of collections every month. So it's not an interest rate linked fee, and as a result, it's not linked to prime or to the repo rates. It's not a variable rate product. If you borrow today, you've got a fixed installment commitment over your repayment period.
And then touching on the application process itself, can you elaborate on the application timeline? From the time you said it in your introduction, things can be quite pressing for SMMEs. What's that timeline look like?
So application process wise, it should take you 10 minutes, assuming you've got all your documentation. 2 minutes to get an indicative quote. That documentation is then, any supporting documentation is then submitted to us for the application process. You should have a definitive answer and be able to access your funds within 24 to 48 hours. We strive for 24. We probably meet the bulk of that service standard within 2 days.
That's absolutely incredible. And just going back to the repayment, but the flip side of repayments, early repayment. Are we going to be penalized for early repayment? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's no penalty. There's no penalty for early repayment. If your business is more successful, able to repay sooner, then absolutely, and then you'd be able to reapply if you needed to access it again in future. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's fairly flexible. There's no penalty. We want businesses to scale and grow. I think that's like the core message that we take away. And so however we can support you, you in doing that, that's great.
Absolutely. Vodacom wants to see your success. I think that's the aim from that perspective. And Mark, you did touch on it earlier on, but sometimes I'm not sure if it's the consumer or the business, the applicant that doesn't read through everything or doesn't quite understand, but there's sometimes a little bit of a surprise. You go, oh, I didn't know about this. But when it comes to transparency, how will they be informed about interest rate calculations, fees associated with the funding, and all the rest of it that goes along with it?
Yeah, so again, so it's because it's such a simply, it's a simply, let's say, priced product. There's no hidden fees, there's no hidden charges. What you see as your monthly installment is typically allocated then between the fee and the capital repayment.
Yeah.
So there's no, you would when you sign your contract, you would see the terms and conditions, and you would see the repayment schedule show you the monthly fee, the monthly repayment, and the fee and capital breakdown of that.
Okay, that's wonderful. And the question that I wanted to ask you next is, if I do have any queries, is there a call center? Can I only make those queries online? Is there somebody that will consult with me? How does it work?
Yeah, so there's a full-blown support service that is run in conjunction with VodaLend. So some customers we know come through to our core kind of Vodacom Financial Services call center and get a certain level of service from there, and then very deep technical potential questions generally will engage with ourselves, with VodaLend via ourselves, and work to resolve. But there's voice, web, email, so not traditional electronic, let's say, contact points.
Yeah, because also sometimes you want to speak to somebody beyond the bot, if I can say it that way. It's great that full service option is available. And a question that I've seen coming through as well is, how much is this funding going to cost? There shouldn't be a hard cost, or that's the question that
so again, each business and each risk assessment and each is unique. So I would encourage people to apply, see the indicative quote. It can be anywhere from, I guess, the equivalent of kind of 25% to maybe 30% per annum. But it's very dependent on the risk profile of the business. So I would encourage people to go through the application journey, provide their detail, and see what they might qualify for.
Perfect. Now, can you believe we've already been in discussion for almost 35 minutes, and there's a whole lot of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to ask everyone online, please pop your questions into the Q&A box, and I'm going to try and Mark is going to try and get to as many of those questions as possible. But Mark, are there any benefits, Marius asks, with regards to preferential interest rates for level 1 BE customers?
So that's a great question. Currently, there isn't, but I think when we started the call, I said one of the things that I'd love to do in this is come away with ideas about how we can make the product better. That's definitely a very positive idea about where we reward businesses' contributions to the growth of SA, be that a PE, be that employment opportunities. So that one I'm definitely going to take away and go and have a look at and talk to the partners and see whether there's an opportunity to do something for that, because that would be a really great feature, I think, to bring into the product.
Okay, that's excellent. Lindani says that they are a startup business still in process. They've been trying to apply for funding from VodaLend, and most of the documentation that was required, they did not have. Mostly it was the business financial documents. So they wanted to know what's the process, or is Vodacom doing anything to help the startup businesses in particular that might not have those documents yet?
So depending on what those documents are that are missing, I think that may or may not make a difference. we currently don't in the BTA, in the business term advance product space, we don't provide you know, like an ability to walk someone through that kind of process and the journey. But again, that's you know, that's something I think as the business and the product tells that we could look at from a startup perspective. We don't have a startup finance product at the moment. And I think we need to, you know, we need to really look at the risk. Like the startup risk is different to SMEs that have been trading for a period in general. So I think it would be, you know, again, an opportunity to consider.
Correct. The need is there, clearly. So it'd be wonderful to see if something does transpire in the future. Another question from Winston. Do you only provide 6 and 12-month repayment terms, or is there a 24-month repayment option, for instance?
So there are some there are some businesses that we financed over 24 months. Again, it is, you know, amount risk assessment, like risk assessment of the business, the amount of finance, sector, etc. There are businesses that we've done over a slightly longer term, but the bulk of what we do is over 6 and 12.
Okay, wonderful. Mark, Moira is asking, and I can't quite recall. I may just, for fear of being incorrect. She's saying that they've been operating for 3 years. They're on a consistent 30,000 Rand per month turnover. Does she qualify?
So yeah, so we said earlier, you know, you need a minimum of 40, and the rest. I would encourage her to apply anyway, to be honest, just because I think, you know, and again, like, I think good, strong track record of performance might outweigh, and again, like, it depends on the broader risk assessment of the business, but might outweigh shorter term, you know, kind of like just being under that cash flow threshold, as an example.
Okay, excellent.
It depends on the amount of finance, right? So there's a whole lot of factors that input into that. I mean, we have these hard rules, but again, I'm on this call to, you know, to be able to question in my own mind and back into business about why we have those hard rules.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Mark. Moira, there you have your answer. Apply anyway. Rafilwa wants to know, how does she apply? Stick around, Rafilwa, because Mark is going to show you precisely how to do that. What is the maximum amount of the loan? Akona wants to know.
So the maximum amount that we finance up to at the moment is 5 million Rand. In general, the average that we see at a disbursement level is pretty much between 150 to 200,000 Rand in terms of businesses that apply. But we have written some of those big deals. Maximum loan amount at the moment, maximum funding amount is 5 million Rand.
Okay, perfect. Mark, you're the expert, so I hope you know the answer to this question. But it's jumping around over here. Afika wants to know, or they're saying that they fund mainly purchase orders. Can they apply for 500,000, for example, and only get a portion of that money when she has the PO that needs funding?
Okay, so again, I would encourage her to apply, because we don't ask specifically what the need is for the funding. So if you qualify for, you know, if you apply and you qualify in 500 and you only need to draw 200 of that down, we would be able to, you know, to consider that. We don't provide a purchase order financing product specifically, though. So that supply chain finance, purchase order finance product in the broader market, we currently don't have a product in that space. I saw it come up quite a few times in the Q&A.
Yes, I see that.
And it's one that I'm going to take away as well, because I think the need for that in the market is more material, I think, than we might have anticipated, and I think generally than what providers of the more traditional term advance in the product in the market think. But you'd be able to take the term advance and use it for that, repay it early with no penalty. And generally, when you come back for your second or third term advance, so if you are a returning customer, that product becomes a facility product, almost by default. So you're able to access, you're provided with a line of, say, 500,000 Rand, and you're able to draw that as needed.
Okay, wonderful. Jennifer wants to know, and I think this is a good one as well. Does VodaLend look at all sorts of finance? She has a 3-year contract with estimated sales over the period of about 40 million Rand. It's in the manufacturing sector, and she needs about 11 million to procure raw material. Is that something that could be considered? And she says she is already a VodaLend client.
Okay, so again, so our maximum financing amount is 5 million rand. So if you're looking for, you're fundamentally looking for an 11 million rand ticket at this stage, we wouldn't be able to assist.
Okay.
And if you are a Lula client, to be very honest, you'd have a greater probability of refinancing existing lines with them. You could reply with us, but you have a greater probability of leveraging the good relationships and good performance that you've built up previously.
Okay, wonderful. Well, there you have your answer, Jennifer. I see that purchase order 1 is coming up as I'm scrolling along. Google would like to know, she wants to upscale their business and needs 250,000 that would help in job and business creation in the townships. She's been operating for 2 years, and I think we've got the answer to this one. She's making about, he or she's making about 10,000 Rand a month. I think Google at this point, it's still coming in below. Am I right, Mark?
Yeah, so that is well below. And I think if you looked at needing 250 as an example as a whole, like 250 over 12 months,
yeah,
even before you add the interest, the fee component would already be 20,000 Rand. So if turnover is 10 and the capital repayment is 20, it's very difficult to find a way to finance that.
Okay. So there you have your answer, Gugu. Just keep growing until you are ready to meet the criteria. Sibasiso says that their company connects SMMEs with funders trading as capital links. Can they refer their clients to VodaLend? Or is that something you'd need to discuss with them directly?
So I'd welcome opportunity, I think, to have that discussion. We realize that we have a certain distribution and reach. We can't reach everyone. This year, so we just started our financial year in April. One of our objectives in the business lending space is to build out an affiliate program for businesses like that can connect us to SMEs that need funding and that can potentially make use of the product and services. And then there's a rewards incentive program built in around that. So I'd encourage, if there's a way to share details post the call offline, I'd really encourage that. I'd be very happy to have that discussion.
Okay, wonderful. I can send you their email address because they've popped it into the Q&A. Mark, there are a couple of questions that's coming on in the chat itself, and there's more than one, maybe for you to take back again, that talks about the repayment period. Quite a few people are saying they understand the rationale behind the 6 to 12 month periods, but they believe that extending that could give you a much bigger audience. Anything to say concerning that?
I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. What we've got to the point of at the moment is 5 years worth of good solid 12-month product performance, let's say. We have to look for ways for the product to evolve, grow, and remain relevant. And I think, term is definitely one that, Kim, you made the point. I mean, it's popped up in the Q&A, it's popped up in the chat. The term is definitely one that that shows that in order to remain relevant, we've got to potentially look at extending the term of the offers that we make into the market. So definitely take that one away.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Mark. And then I know we touched on interest rates and comparing to other lenders in the market. I can't recall because I was busy reading some of the questions. But did you stipulate what that interest rate is? Because there's a couple of people in the chat also asking what is the interest rate in particular.
Yeah. So because it's based on an application application basis, right? So depending on the business's risk assessment, there's some variance in that. In that risk and that price. And what I'd say is that we're priced competitively alongside the other providers in the market, but it's very much based on an individual and an individual risk assessment of each business and each entity.
Okay. And then Mark, I'm sure you understand this one much better than me. Do you offer invoice discounting?
No, so similar to purchase order financing, supply chain. Want to take that away because it came up consistently through the process. Right now, we don't offer that as a financing option. But again, if you consider the use case for business term advance, if you have a 250,000 gap, you could almost apply for that and the cash flows, and you meet all the other criteria. You could use business term advance while you waited for that invoice to arrive potentially, and then settle it in full with no penalties at the at the point that you do receive payment. So the key point, I think, I mean, we made the point earlier about the use case is we want you to use it to survive, thrive, and grow. Right? How you do that and how you see that need, I think, as SMEs is entirely up to you. So we just want to give you the control to and the funding to be able to make those the best decisions that you're able to make.
Correct. And then Mark Sandisiwe says, and Sandisiwe, you're saying that, I'm assuming, because you say you've applied a couple of times, but you've never received the loan. So I'm assuming you do meet all the criteria. But again, Mark, I'm sure you'll agree that this is a case-by-case basis. They'd have to get hold of your team to find out why it's been rejected.
Absolutely. I do think in some of the ones like that, again, please share your contact details with Kim or in the chat, and I'd actually like to go away and just have a look at that as well, because sometimes the rules and there's decision in, it's always useful to understand the actual customer experience and whether there's things we can do better.
Wonderful. And I think this is a bit of a technical question. This is the second last question I'm going to take for today. This is a technical question. Do you have a walk-in office? The system is refusing to reset my password.
No, we don't. Unfortunately, we don't have a walk-in office. I won't say at the moment, but it's not a face. We don't have a kind of face-to-face servicing capability. There are kind of email contact points and the rest, again, at the risk of winding up with a lot of emails post to school. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, I hasten to add. But I think, again, if you're struggling like that, like, drop your email in the chat, Kim will share it. I do want to try and look at these. And then, what that implies is we might not have enough visibility on the service points and the touch points and the rest. So please share and let's see what we can do.
And then I think a really great question to wrap up. Mabolaya is asking, are there any funding preferences for Vodacom vendors that they can use to grow their services for Vodacom in particular?
So where you are a supplier to Vodacom, obviously you can use the products freely, but there is, we've had all this purchase order and invoice discounting, financing discussions. We don't do it in the broader market, but we do have a supply chain finance product offering for Vodacom suppliers. So again, if you could share your details in the chat, and I will get the person that runs that product to reach out with you directly, understand your relationship with Vodacom, and if there's any opportunity we have in that space to assist.
Wonderful. Mark, thank you for really what is an insightful and an eye-opening discussion. And just judging by the questions coming through and the fact that we've been talking for nearly an hour, thank you for meeting the need for SMMEs and for seeing them in the marketplace and wanting them to thrive and grow. To everybody else, thank you so much for joining us today. As you know, these webinars do happen on a regular basis. Look out on our YouTube and on our website where you'll be able to rewatch this. And of course, reach out to VodaLend so that you can take your business one step further. But Refilwe says, Kim, I didn't hear on how to make the application. So Mark, over to you for that one.
Cool. Thanks so much, Kim. So I think, before we go, we just show you the kind of how to apply. But I guess before I do that as well, like, I've had a blast. I think we could go another hour. I think doing these questions, it's been wonderful. I think to engage with everybody. Some really thought-provoking, good questions and ideas that you've given us around the product that really want to take away and challenge the teams to think about and how we can enhance the service to you. So let me just dive into the demo of how to apply. This is if you typed in vodacom.co.za into your browser, you would land here. You select business, and you get to, essentially you'll get to this view of the screen. So this is the vodacombusiness.co.za site. Under financial services, in lending, we have business term advance and business cash advance. Business cash advance is the product that is provided, the financing product that's provided if you use a Vodacom point of sale device. So if you're using it quicker and you've used it for 3 months, it's that turnover that's used to set the business cash advance, your business cash advance limits. But in order to apply for BTA, for business term advance, you would then click on that. That takes you to the product, the overall product landing page. We've got some testimonials similar to the one that we played earlier. Up to, as we said, up to 5 million in funding. We are usage agnostic, so cash flow to buy stock, pay salaries, settle bills, meet payroll, pay rentals, and accessible generally within 24 hours. It's about a 10-minute application. The decision is fast, and once it's approved, it's paid into your bank account within 24 hours. As we said, be registered and operational for 12 consecutive months. It's 40,000 a month or 500,000 a year. So those questions that came out about, I don't do 40 a month, but I do 500 a year. Like the cash flow is not consistent. It's lumpy. Again, apply business. We can look to see how we can meet that need. And then, a little bit more around testimonials and journeys. So easiest place is just click on Get Business Term Advance. And this then takes you into the application journey. So low touch initial information, and that will take you into a deeper, a deeper kind of decision in customer assessment piece. You'll be required to upload your documents, and then you can go from there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mark. And I see behind you, is it 30 years? The next 30 years. Is it 30 years of innovation?
The next 30 years, yeah. So Vodacom started in 1994.
Excellent.
So we're in our 30th year.
Wonderful. Thank you for innovating in South Africa and beyond for the past 30 years. And as I said, for seeing SMMEs and meeting their needs. So thank you so much, Mark. Thank you everyone for joining us on behalf of the Innovator Trust. We can't wait for the next webinar where you can once again take another opportunity to invest in yourselves. Look out for this recording on our YouTube and on our website. We'll see you again soon. God bless. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.